Okay, good evening and welcome to the Foxborough Zoning Board of Appeals, May 18, 2023 meeting. This meeting and the hearings that we will be considering is being broadcast and recorded by Foxborough Cable Access. The time being 7 p.m., we have the continued appeal by J. Cook Realty, LLC, pursuant to Section 10.2.2.1 of the Code of the Town of Foxborough, Massachusetts, Chapter 275, Zoning, of a zoning enforcement decision dated February 22, 2023, from the Town of Foxborough Building Commissioner and Zoning Enforcement Officer, stating unlawful storage at 24 East Belcher Road is a violation of Chapter 275 zoning, Table 3-1, Table of Uses, Use 3.1.6 D.4, junkyard, auto graveyard. Properties located in the Limited Industrial District and the Water Resource Protection Overlay District. We've received an email from Attorney Lovely, who is representing the appellant, and he has requested a continuance. Our next meeting is June 29. What I would like would be for a motion to continue the hearing to June 29 and to allow us to render a decision to extend that until July 20th. Is that our next meeting, Diana?
I think so. Yes.
July 20th, because the 100-day period within which we're otherwise required to make a decision will occur before June 29th. Okay?
So moved.
So moved. Do I have a second? Is Kurt here? Is Kurt on?
Yeah, Kurt is here, yes.
Kurt, would you second that? You're going to have to vote on this because you were appointed and Lorraine was also at the prior hearing. So will you second that motion?
I second that.
Okay, and I have to do it by roll call. So Lorraine?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
And Barney, yes. And Diane, I'll contact Jeff Lovely tomorrow on this.
Okay.
Okay, the time being 7:01 p.m., Foxborough Realty Associates, LLC, requests a special sign permit as applicable to signs within a large development in Sign District 1 pursuant to the Code of the Town of Foxborough, Massachusetts, Chapter 213, Signs, Section 213-3B and C, to allow for one, the video message board component of the replacement signs, and two, the replacement signs to exceed the permitted size at Patriot Place. Assessor's map 10, was it parcel 6? Or page 6, map 24, page 2, and map 10, page 7.
Map and parcel is what it is. It's map, parcel.
Okay, so we've got two of us here, two of us on Zoom. The voting members on this will be me, Dave Brown, and Kurt Yegian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Peter Tam of Goulston and Stores on behalf of the applicant, Foxborough Realty Associates, as well as the Craft Group, their affiliate. With me tonight is Beth Wehrling from the Craft Group, my colleague Chase Johnson from Goulston, and in addition, we have a separate hearing for a separate set of signs for which Chris Walters of Mass General Brigham is also attending, but we'll hold that one and focus on the first matter before you. And this is actually, I think, good news from the town's perspective and from the Craft Group's perspective. The goal here is to invest and upgrade two existing pylons that people are generally familiar with that represent the arrival from the north and south to Patriot Place in the stadium. The existing two pylons are showing some age, and the idea is to upgrade them, modernize them, and make them so that they present and reflect, I think, the investment that is currently being made in the stadium in Patriot Place. So, Chase, if we can, we'll walk the board through a quick presentation, but obviously feel free to interrupt if you have any questions along the way. All of this material is in your package. Next slide. So we're focused for this hearing on the 2 replacement pylon signs. And by pylon, these are the standing signs, relatively tall, that are along the frontage along Route 1. So it's a little difficult to tell with the lights on here in Town Hall, but we call these the P1 and P9 entrance. And there's 2 existing signs that were permitted and developed, Beth, if I'm correct, in the 2007 era.
Correct.
The red X on the top of this plan represents the P1 sign, which exists. And the blue X to the bottom of the plan is to the south, represents the P9 pylon. Next slide. Thank you. These are the signs, and you probably have seen them if you're driving Route 1. They're hard to miss unless you're going at highway speed. You can see they're a little long in the tooth. They've been out there a while. A lot of tenant signage. There's a lot going on here. They're slightly different. Each of them, each face represents approximately 200 square feet of sign area. They're about 40 feet in height, and they're internally illuminated. Next slide, please. The idea is to replace them in their exact locations with a larger, more modern sign. These signs would have a video board component, much like the center sign at P6, which is the sort of central entrance as you enter Patriot Place. And this would be conducive for special events, as is represented here, but also if they want to do, if there are, for instance, this evening, there's the car show that's out there, they could advertise that, or frankly, any special events. So the idea of having that flexibility to have the video board on both of these signs, I think, will be very helpful. The total size of each sign would be about 766 square feet of sign area per face. They would have an internally illuminated component on the top and along the edge, and it would have a central video board component. This represents the P1 replacement, and Chase, if you flip to the next one, this would be the southern sign at P9. Very similar, but as you could see from the existing, there's differences in grades. This one is, to the south, is really more at grade. Conceivably, this sign could have some tenant signage, as the existing sign does, in that gray band to the bottom. And we factor that into the calculation here in terms of sign area. It's unlikely that the north sign would have tenant signage on that bottom band just because of it's below grade. Next, please. So the reason why we're here before you is twofold. We need relief to exceed both the maximum size. In sign district 1, the board has discretion to allow for sign in excess of the maximum size. The maximum size permitted here per sign face and sign area is 400 square feet. Each of these would be no more than 766 square feet. We also need your consent to allow for the video component that would constitute an animated sign. Obviously, there are a number of them on the property and along the corridor. Next slide, please. Again, these are the provision that we're seeking relief under. Next, please. We thought it was helpful just to put in a table precisely how this stacks up to your requirements. In general, in sign district 1 in a large development, which is a defined term under the bylaw, there are relatively few requirements, and that's intentional, just because of the size of what is a large development here. And there are very few signs out on Route 1. So we think it's appropriate to, both under your design guidelines and just considering the nature of the development and the investment in the development, to allow for a larger sign here. It is a state highway. There's a mix of uses that are going on. A small sign, as you saw, the two existing pylons really disappear into the context of everything that's going on along the stadium and Patriot Place, so that a sign at 766 square feet is actually contextually appropriate. And we think that adding the video component will be actually very helpful for wayfinding and for orienting as you arrive from both north and south. Next slide. So that is the request for the two pylons. And Mr. Chairman, I can continue if you'd like to talk about the wall signs, or
No,
we
it's
can
a separate hearing.
maybe go back.
The video board, what's the square footage of that? I mean, I calculated, and I may be wrong, I calculated it as about 415 square feet.
Beth tells me it's 358 square feet.
358?
Yeah.
Okay. So 358 is, mathematician, what's the percentage of 358 versus 766?
I'm going to say 45% is my
That's
guess.
higher math.
The reason I'm asking is that I'm looking at this as a message board. And in sign district 1, in large developments, message boards can't exceed 40% of the total sign area. So you would need a special sign permit for that if it's 358 and the total square footage of the sign is 766.
47%.
47?
47 comes out to 360.
I'm sorry?
47% comes out to 360, so a little.
Okay,
Yeah, 0.467.
so approximately 47.
Mr. Chairman, we had considered this, and I think there's a little bit of ambiguity between your discretion to authorize an animated sign and what was considered as a message board.
Mm-hmm.
And the definitions, the definition of message board seems to depend upon the duration of the message.
Correct. So let me then ask you this. When you talk about a video board and animated, what do you mean?
So as opposed to a pure message board, where essentially only lettering or numbering would be displayed, this is going to be more dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition of animated allows for action and motion through electrical or mechanical means. It's a broader definition. And it says, although technologically similar to flashing signs, the animated sign emphasizes graphics and artistic display. So I think you're right in pointing to this example as equating to a message board, but I think this particular technology is going to be, it's going to go beyond just displaying letters and numbers and messages, so that you could display art, graphics, movement. And I can, in thinking about and I defer to you, Mr. Chairman, because you have more experience in this, but in thinking about the purpose, the policy purpose, by limiting a message board, it's really I think of the time and temperature type message boards, which are fairly linear, right? You don't want that to, as a policy goal, you might not want that to dominate a sign. Whereas this is more kind of integral to the whole sign.
So on this, whatever, diagram, picture, where it says Garth Brooks, grand new opening night, how would what you're envisioning differ from this? This, to my mind, would be a message board. It would be up here for, 10 seconds, and then it might say, football game Sunday at 1 o'clock. Then it might say, sale at, whatever the store, might be in Patriot Place. So how would what you're envisioning differ from that?
The idea that you could have an image of Garth.
Singing?
Well, it could follow this, right? There would be animation or there would be art that is reflective of the particular event or the purpose of the signage. So it would not be limited to just a message. It's much more dynamic and probably more of a, again, this is, the definition of animated sign, at least in my mind, is much broader. And goes, it's more extensive. So my thinking, and you may disagree, is that, if the board were to allow for an animated sign here, it would cover messaging, art, display, action. It allows you the discretion to have a truly dynamic sign in this location.
And let me ask another one or two questions, then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. The two signs are obviously on Route 1, which obviously is a public way. So doesn't the outdoor advertising board and its regulations come into play here? And assuming that you agree, they do not allow in their regulations illumination that moves, appears to move, or changes in intensity during the static display period. They don't allow flashing, intermittent, or moving lights, or display animated moving video or scrolling advertising. To me, that sounds comparable to what you're talking about.
The outdoor advertising regulations in general pertain to advertising which is non-locus. This would be on-premise signage for activities, events, and businesses that are operated on-site. So I know the language which you're referring to. I believe, and I can be corrected, that it only pertains, what you've cited pertains to off-premise signage, such as billboards. But to address the concern, again, from a public safety and a policy perspective, this board, because it is a dynamic display, it can be adjusted and it can be regulated. So we're going to be in compliance with all applicable requirements, including requirements of your own bylaw, which would prevent a nuisance or any sort of public safety concern. I believe, Chase, there's limitations on flashing, for instance.
Flashing and glare.
And, yeah, and the light levels can be adjusted as well. And we would be prepared to accept, as a condition of a special sign permit, you and the building commissioner retaining that authority to require that there be adjustments in light levels if there were to be any issues.
Okay, let me let others ask questions. Dave, can you hear us? You have any questions?
You're muted, Dave.
I'm wondering how many luminums might be involved with this.
Sure, just find it. Doesn't specifically talk about luminance in the proposal I have for the sign message board. However, it does talk about, it's a 10 millimeter board, so, but I'm sure that's something we can find if we need to.
Okay.
Well, I think that's kind of important, don't you?
We do have a specification here. There's a maximum power, but in terms of lumens,
Or maybe you could compare it to the current sign.
It'll be the same technology as the current sign.
did you hear that, sir? It's intended to be the same technology as the existing P6 entrance sign. So presumably, in
Okay.
terms of light level, it would be the equivalent. And again, the idea here is that if it's not intended to provide or produce glare, should it do so, the light level can be adjusted.
So maybe you could do this, you can include somehow, what the present amount is and what you estimate the new one would be.
We would be prepared to submit that to the building commissioner with a signed permit application.
Okay. So we could condition it on that.
Dave, anything else?
Nope, that's it.
Kirk, questions?
Just one quick question, and thanks for putting together such, a good package here. How is this sign different as far as the video portion from the P6 sign that you currently have in place?
Beth tells me it's functionally equivalent to the P6 sign.
Okay. And how long has the P6 sign been in place in its current state?
2017, I think. Is that accurate? Hold on one second, I can tell you that, just a minute.
Yeah, we think about 5 years.
What's the size of the P6 sign? Do you know?
Now you're getting into the stump the chumps section.
The P6 sign was 2016.
16?
Do we think it's about the same size? It's smaller.
I'm not sure.
It's definitely smaller.
Yeah.
I had asked, Scott, and you estimated it's about 35 feet in height.
It's probably close to
Yeah.
that, probably a little higher. I do have one question. Does that show the same, would that show, that P6 be able to show the same content that this, like Gothbrook space?
So just to comment on that, the P6, P1, and P9 sign will all be able to coordinate together via a content management system that the Patriot Place management team can program from pretty much anywhere.
But can the existing one now do it as it stands now?
As it stands now, it will be the same kind of content that can be displayed on the P6. Mhm. Similar. Mhm.
So it's displaying animated?
But the P6 sign is not animated now, it's just a message board, isn't it?
No,
It's not?
no.
That was my question.
Yeah, that's what I mean, Marty. It's like,
But it can
it's
display-
the,
Yes.
I think what they're proposing is basically
It can
what's
display
existing
art.
in
Kurt was,
P6.
Sorry.
go ahead, Kurt.
No, I think that if I'm reading this correctly, what they're proposing now is the same or extremely similar to what currently exists at the P6 entrance.
Correct.
That's correct.
Every time I've gone by there, I've noticed it as really as a message board, as a static sign. I mean, it's electronic or digital, but, I haven't seen any of the animation toward, to the respect that,
Neither have I.
yeah. Ren, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Just a question about the gray section on the bottom. So that would be a message board? Is that correct? The gray section on the bottom that you said would have,
That would be static.
that would be static.
So that'd be a conventional sign. It would not have a digital or animated component.
And so the larger area, the art, for example, would not be moving art? Would that be moving art, or we were talking about pictures?
I don't think, well, I'll have to ask the question. I suppose it could be programmed so it could be movable or dynamic. And the definitions do allow for that. Obviously, the content can be programmed. So the definition of an animated sign is a sign that depicts action or motion through electrical or mechanical means. But again, the bylaw provides protection in the sense of not causing a nuisance by prohibiting flashing or frankly, excessive glare. And I think your building commissioner has the discretion also to determine a nuisance. And it's not in ownership's interest, considering what they have at stake here, to create any sort of nuisance here. I think the idea here is rather the animated component here will be a way to easily identify where to go, whether it's P1, P6, or P9, when it comes to special events and to people who may be unfamiliar with the area. And you would not be able to do that with a static sign. And today, for special events, if you go out there this afternoon, they have electronic message boards to do the very same purpose. So this would, I think, be helpful in that regard.
And how long would each of these animations last? Is it the same 10-second as a message board?
The animated sign doesn't have that restriction. So by an animated sign, you can actually have motion. So you don't have a static message. I think in this instance, it's used, today's P6 is used, I've seen it in both ways, right? I have seen some motion, and at the same time, I've also seen some static messaging, like you'd see this.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Scott, do you have any other questions?
No,
Okay.
not at this time.
Kurt, any other questions?
Not right now, Barney, no.
Dave, any other questions?
Nope. No other questions? Get that?
I probably didn't this time, but I call it Little Seymour. Little Seymour? Little Seymour.
That's somebody at Dave's house?
Yeah, there's
Okay.
people at his house.
I'm trying to think about any other questions. No, I guess we can discuss. You want to have a motion to, no, I have to have, Kurt, would you make a motion to close the public portion of the hearing?
Move to make a motion to close the public portion of the hearing.
Dave, you second it?
Second.
Okay, Dave? We need a yes or a no?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
And Barney, yes.
Yeah, look like his grandpa. Yes.
I'm not at all concerned about the size of the signs. Notwithstanding they're bigger than P6, I'm not concerned about that. And including the size, I'm also talking about the video message board, whatever we want to call it. I'm not concerned about that. I do have concerns about something that's animated, and I do feel that
Now or later?
the state regulations come into play here. Because 700 CMR 3.17 talks about electronic signs. You know, we've dealt with it before as far as billboards because they are electronic signs, but it just deals with electronic signs in general. So I do have some concerns about the animation. And you're here, you want to start with?
Sure, I mean, I agree. I think the size is appropriate for the area. I think personally, I don't ever recall seeing animation at P6, but I want to make sure that we would be in compliance with the 700 CMR rules. So, you know, I think it would be appropriate to be a message board that could show something like this sign, Garth Brooks, just photograph art, but not the animation piece.
But not him moving?
Not him moving.
And
no,
singing?
no. Not on Route 1.
And Scott and I had talked yesterday relative to the P6 sign, and I think neither one of us, well, Scott wasn't here, but I have no recollection of that ever coming before us. So I think because of its size, complying with the bylaw, and some building commissioner, I guess in 2016 it would have been Bill, would have approved it. Do you have any recollection of anything in the records that show it's an animated sign, or?
I didn't do a research of it, so not off the top of my head now.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of order, we believe that the P6, and I would need to look back at our records, but we believe that there is a unique circumstance for P6. You recall there was formerly a marquee sign there.
I have no recollection of that.
Many years ago, and it sat behind
Yeah.
the stadium for many years.
Okay.
The P6 sign replaced what was the stadium marquee sign.
Okay.
So it was, I believe, authorized under a sort of a special category. I would also offer, with respect to the movement or the dynamic nature of these signs, if that is of concern to you or to members of the board, typically flashing, moving, rotating, or revolving signs with lights are prohibited in all sign districts. But there is an exception for signs located in large developments that have frontage on Washington Street and are located within Sign District 1. So that, there is some intentionality to that provision. It does in fact allow for just these types of signs as animated signs within this particular location. And with respect to the state regulations, again, I do not think they apply here, but if it would, and that is very much within the state's authority to enforce. If it would give the board comfort, the sign special permit can be subject to us ensuring that we're in full compliance with all applicable state regulations.
Well, typically what we've done with billboards is we've referenced the state regs and essentially incorporated them into our decision as a condition. And we've also required whatever permit might be necessary from the, from the state, as a condition. And if we approve this, we would, we would do likewise.
Although here, again, this is an on-premise sign.
But again, it's an electronic sign that's on.
It would not require a permit.
I'm not sure I agree. I'm not sure. I'm not going to say that I'm right. I'm not going to say that I'm wrong, but.
We would, but if there was a condition, we would say to the extent applicable.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would be very comfortable with that.
We use the word may.
Fair enough. So if that is of concern to you or to the board, we would be prepared for such a condition. The idea here is not to have a sign that presents any sort of distraction or nuisance.
Let me go on to David and Kurt. Dave and Kurt, comments? Dave, you want to go first? Actually, can we get that off so we can see? Dave, comments?
You're on mute.
You're muted, David.
How's that, better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have any further comment about it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dave, what's your thought about the, as Mr. Tam has indicated, the motion, the graphics, the animation aspect of it?
Animation is something that I don't really get thrilled about.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Dave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we had some noise from outside with the custodians, so I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let me try again. I'm having a few issues on my end. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. The animation to me could be a problem. Because it's continuously changing the sign and the message. Could be. And I know we've looked at some others where there was going to be, I believe, there was going to be quite a bit of animation. And I just find that to be of concern. Because really it's a message that's going to keep changing. Now, I know on a regular message sign, we require some kind of timing, I think it is, between, each part of the message or each message. So it was at least up there for a little while. Have people trying to read it as they're going by. If you get it, what I'm saying.
Yep.
And that's all I got to say about that.
Okay. Do you have any problems with or any concerns with the size?
No, I think that's all right.
Okay.
They just keep getting bigger and bigger. I don't know if you wanted to maybe change the bylaws sometime and say maximum, an absolute maximum size.
Well, the bylaw does have, maximum sizes, but it allows us by special sign permit to exceed those dimensions.
Yeah,
So,
which means everybody's gonna come along looking for a larger sign. Bigger is better, you know?
okay. Kurt, thoughts?
My thoughts are that I can appreciate that the existing signage there needs to be changed. It's quite dated and not really in character with the modernization of Patriot Place and the upkeep of it. So I think I think the size is appropriate. I am a little concerned about the animation. I don't know exactly what that animation is going to look like, how fast, if there's words, how distracting. And clearly, I understand that there's no premise here, or rather, there's no kind of pretext to distract people on Route 1, and I understand that, but I'm okay with the size. I understand needs to be upgraded. I am concerned about the animation.
Mr. Chairman, could I offer another point?
Sure.
Appreciating that members of the board are concerned about the animation, perhaps because we haven't seen it, right? And this is novel, it's a unique location, it's a unique circumstance. A question for the board and for the building commissioner is whether we could allow for, if the board was amenable, authorize the signs as proposed, but with respect to dynamic animation, that is, anything other than a static image or a message, we would have a trial period where we could come back to you with some assessment by the building commissioner and public safety, and report on whether or not, in their subjective opinion, it presents any issues. And if it did, we would stick with more of a static image.
Scott, what are your thoughts on that?
I'd be comfortable with that. I mean, what would be the time period?
Well,
30
another way of
days.
doing it, I think, is if we
Can
could see something.
can we get a demonstration?
Yeah, I mean, to
Right.
continue the, hearing and get a demonstration as to what it might look like. I think I'd rather do that than a trial period.
You can probably, can P9 do that right now?
Yes.
P6.
P6, I'm
P6
sorry.
can do that
P6.
right now, yes.
So
We could provide examples from P6 if you want.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think I'd rather see it beforehand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, we hear. Yeah, I like that idea too. If we could just get an idea, an understanding of what these animations look like, if they could send us like, I don't know, a quick video or something like that,
Yeah.
that would be extremely helpful and comforting for me.
The very first time we considered and approved a digital billboard, we had a demonstration, which was very helpful to indicate how they worked, what they did, what they didn't do. So if we can have something of that nature, it might, it might accomplish what you're saying, but allow us, beforehand to get a better sense as to what it is, as opposed to approve something, have a trial period, and then, try to deal with it, which I think it makes it difficult for you. You might have an opinion on it that'll be different than Chief Grace, who might have a different opinion than, the rest of us.
Well, somebody is in town right now.
And it's busy.
So just flash her on that or something,
Yeah, I do think we could, if it was the will of the board, we could continue this particular hearing and offer at least some video example using P6 as a test or some other simulation. And if we're able to consult with the building commissioner in the intervening time, he or you could, go out in the field and see it for yourselves if that, if we were able to do that.
I mean, what we would be doing, we would be continuing the hearing to next month. Would it be possible to do a video here, or? I mean, every time, when I've been up on Route 1 coming north and looking at the sign of P6, it looks static to me, just as a message board. Maybe just, the times that I'm hitting it or hitting the red light up there. So if I had an example of what you're talking about in the way of animation, as opposed to standing on Route 1, and looking at the sign, it might make more sense. And it would bring us all together to look at it, so I think that would make more sense.
So if you could give us even the feed of what's currently animated up there, I think that, because we've never
we can do
noticed
that.
it. Never
We'll
noticed
do I think Beth hears you loud and clear, so.
And as well as answering Dave's earlier question about the lumens.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
Also, I'd be interested, like maximum lengths of these video sections. Segments.
It'll be a video segment.
Thank you.
so Dave or Kurt, do you want to make a motion to continue the hearing to the 29th of June?
Yeah, you got me up there?
Yep.
I would move that we continue this hearing to the 29th of June, which at that time or before, the applicant would provide a video of what things would look like with that size sign and that size, and the aluminum illuminated as well.
Kurt, second it, please.
Second.
And again, I got to do a roll call. Dave?
Aye.
Kurt?
Yes.
And Barney, yes. So we'll continue to June 29th. We've got another hearing that night. I don't know which one we want to do first. We'll talk to you about that. The other hearing could be dynamic.
Well, we're focused, Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, because it'll be the passage of a month. We're going to focus not, we're sort of beyond, as I'm hearing from the board, the size of the sign.
Right.
We're not necessarily concerned with the message board. We're really focused on the animation
Yes.
component.
Yeah.
And that's going to be our sole purpose, is to demonstrate that particular function.
And if you want to put something in writing to clarify what you feel is the requirements or non-requirements as far as
We'll
the
do
state
that.
regs, and I'm going to do some more research on that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, give us about 20 seconds, and we'll start the next one.
I'm fine.
See, the nice thing about continuing it is I don't have to write a decision tomorrow. Okay, the time being 7:10 PM, Mass General Brigham requests a special sign permit as applicable to signs within a large development in Sign District 1 pursuant to the Code of the Town of Foxborough, Massachusetts, Chapter 213 Signs, Section 213-3B and C, to allow for 1, the proposed wall signs to exceed the permitted size, and 2, the proposed wall signs as animated signs at 360 Patriot Place, Assessors Map 24, Parcel 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Peter Tam from Goulston and Storrs. in this case on behalf of Mass General Brigham. With me, my colleague Chase Johnson, who's manning our presentation, as well as Chris Walters from Mass General Brigham.
Beth's not involved in this one? Okay.
Beth is representing the landlord here.
Okay. Chris, is it WAL?
TERS.
Okay. Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, this is similar but to your last hearing, but the signs are different in nature, and I'll walk you through them. We have a similar presentation. Next slide, Chase, please. We're focused on, and Chris will interrupt me or clarify if I don't get anything right, but this is the Mass General Brigham Sports Complex, which is in the southern retail portion of Patriot Place, that's shown here with a red dot, kind of lost in the sea of different uses down there. There is, again, this is under your bylaw, a large development in Sign District 1, and we're focused on additional wall signage to support what is an exciting new facility down there in the south retail area. You can see from this graphic, as well as the next graphic, that the South Retail Plaza is very far removed from Route 1. And in fact, there's a number of businesses down there. It's very hard from Route 1 to understand how to get there or who's down there. So this effort is to provide for some, I think, dynamic, exciting supplementary signage to support the wall signage that exists there for this new facility. Next slide. This is the view from Route 1. Is this the P1 or P6?
No, this would be P6, I think.
This is the P6 entrance.
This would be the closest point along Route 1 at which you'd see our frontage.
And it would be difficult in this lighting conditions to see Mass General Brigham's facility. The lower graphic, those yellow highlighted boxes are the areas that we're focused on. That is actually the facade of Mass General Brigham's complex. And that is approximates the size of the signage that is proposed on either side of the building entrance. Next slide, please. If you go out there today, you see something like this. The center sign was permitted and it meets the bylaw, and it was approved by your building commissioner as a sign permit, did not require any special relief. It started with a temporary sign. There is now in place a permanent sign, but this is reflective of its total size. Next slide, please. What is proposed is to add two new, again, dynamic signs on either side that reflect a lot of the activity and focus of this sports complex. The size of these signs, they're not, one is slightly larger. The left side is just a hair larger than the right at 528 square feet, the right being 499 square feet. In total, inclusive of the center sign, these would total 1,769 square feet of sign area. So, next slide. This shows you on a percentage basis how much of the existing building facade and wall facade would be occupied by each sign. There is a limit in Sign District 1 for large developments that no more than 30% of a wall may be occupied by a wall sign unless a special sign permit is obtained. So with the addition of these two complementary signs, The percentage of the wall for this particular building would amount to 55% of the wall. As you can see, Chase, if you were to back up to that image from Route 1, here you see it from a distance. While it is 55% of that single wall, there is quite a bit of wall area in the South Retail Complex. And I don't think that anyone would say that this is dominating that facade. But if we flip forward, the idea here is to provide for signage that's distinctive, that's unique, that differentiates this particular complex from those around it. So, next slide, please. The idea and the request of the board this evening is to allow for these two complementary signs that would exceed 30% of the wall area, and that could also be implemented as digital signs. And that would be at Mass General Brigham's option. They haven't yet determined whether these would be static, and if they were static, Chris can speak to they would be externally illuminated, presumably downlighted or uplighted. They could be almost a banner, or we've given the specifications for if they chose to pursue them as digital signs, and those are included in your package. So, similar to the last hearing, we're seeking your approval in your discretion to allow for wall signs in excess of the 30% of wall area, as well as wall signs that in this case could be animated signs. Next slide. So again, not dissimilar to the pylons that we were previously discussing, there are very few requirements here, and that was intentional considering how large, several hundred acres, we're talking about, and how far removed these buildings are with no private abutters. Under your sign design guidelines, these signs will serve an important function in providing for a distinctive presence for Mass General Brigham's position within the South Plaza. And they'll call out some of the unique functions that Mass General Brigham offers here as opposed to some of the other retail businesses. Next slide. So I can pause there, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just go back. You said the 3 signs will total 55% of the area, of the wall area? Is that correct?
Yes.
And the 2 new signs, or the 2 proposed signs, the total square footage is 1769? Is that correct?
No, it's slightly less.
1,027.
1,027?
Yes.
I'm sorry, okay. And that's just for the 2 signs?
Right.
Okay, I don't know where I got 1769.
1769 is all of it,
That's
including the center one.
Existing sign plus the 2.
That's where I got it, okay.
So in consultation with the building commissioner, we had recognized when we permitted the center principal sign that if we wanted these additional complementary signs, we would need to come to you. And that was always acknowledged. So you do have to total all of the aggregate sign area.
And that's 1769?
That's right.
Okay.
You have to say who will be
Oh, I'm sorry. Lorraine is voting on this one with Dave and me. Lorraine, why don't you start with the questions?
So can you describe, for this example, the animated type, the type of animation that would be being used for this?
Sure, so I'm Chris Walters with Mass General Brigham. So I think similar to the discussion that we had with the pylon signs, we don't have a set program yet. But for example, what's been floated are, as part of Mass General Brigham, we have the Spalding Rehab Network. They have similar dynamic signage where you might see a shot from a bridge above and you might see a rower go by, someone rowing, okay? And then a tagline, in our case, where the everyday athlete may come to train like a professional, something like that. Or you might see feet, someone kicking a soccer ball and kicking a goal. So those are the types of examples of what's been thought of so far. We haven't formally programmed it, but it will be that kind of a thing to sort of describe various sports in I'm thinking, relatively short bursts that sort of show dynamic sport activities. And that's the kind of thing that we'd be looking to do.
And in those other examples, how long do those bursts typically?
They vary. Sometimes there's a little story that might go on for a minute or two. I think in our case, and that's something where you can actually approach it and get close to it. In our case, because this is more of a retail frontage, I wouldn't imagine they would last more than 10 to 30 seconds at the most. But again, we haven't fully programmed it yet, so.
And this would be in color, would it be black and white, or
Color.
would it be both? Color?
We'd do it in color. If we were going to do dynamic signage, we would do it in color, sure. Sorry, I have allergies.
So what are the purposes of a sign within a, complex, such as, the marketplace here would be to designate whose building it is?
Yeah, I
So
mean.
you have, Trader Joe's with a sign designated whose building that is.
Yeah.
Bed Bath and Beyond, dearly departed, designating, who that is.
Right.
Christmas tree shops as well. Why do you need 3 signs to designate, your building?
I think this is a new initiative for Mass General Brigham. So this is.
When you say new initiative, you mean the sports therapy center?
Yeah, right. I mean, there's all the various hospitals and entities of Mass General Brigham have got sports medicine. This is pulling this together into one sort of corporate entity, and this is one of the first sort of marquee facilities of its type. It's not a licensed medical facility. It is more of a sort of a retail brand as part of the sports medicine brand. And in this case, again, the tagline is, so where the everyday athlete can come to train like a professional. So I think in this case, because we're at one of the more recognizable and dynamic sports facilities in the world, but also in a place where the photographs sort of showed it's difficult to see from Route 1 or wherever else kind of what's going on along all that frontage. It's a way to energize, activate, and kind of tell people who we are and what we're trying to do. So that's really what we're trying to do.
There are, for the board's consideration, there's and we can provide further examples, but there's a number of different animated signs in and around Gillette Stadium, as you, I'm sure, are aware. So the idea of having animated signs within a shopping center may be unusual, but not in this context. And I think it's even more important because this is not your traditional, you do want to distinguish this from Trader Joe's. In a retail plaza, you do want to have a distinct presence. It's something very different.
I would think so.
Yeah. So I did go up and see the sign in person, and stands out very well when you're in the parking lot. It was a busy day, and personally, I think having something animated in that environment, even more so than Route 1, has potential for safety issues in terms of pedestrians looking at the sign and not seeing the car that's backing out from parking in a busy parking area. It's one concern that I have based on what I observed when I went up there that day. A lot of traffic typically in that parking lot. But to be honest, that was the sign that caught my eye when I came into that area. Not Trader Joe's, that was the sign. So design-wise, I think it's very eye-catching already. But the safety piece is what I'm concerned about in that area.
So, as we spoke about earlier, the idea was to either go with a dynamic sign or potentially a fixed sign. So Chase, could you bring back the image of the hockey players and the soccer players, that slide? Oh, I'm sorry, it's there. So, in this case, if this was not dynamic, if it was fixed, and one of the ideas was these would potentially be banners that would be swapped out seasonally, say. So they're not moving, but they're externally illuminated, maybe with a tagline or something on it. Would something like that be amenable?
Well, we haven't finished questions yet, but.
Okay, sorry.
But what you're saying is that is another option.
That's right.
To animation.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Any other questions?
No.
Dave and Kurt, questions?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay, David?
Nor do I. You hear that?
Almost like that's going to knock his head off.
I have no questions.
Okay, thanks. Scott, any
None
questions?
at this time.
Okay. I want to just go back to the, again, we said 55% of the wall area would be occupied by 3 signs, is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman?
if we approve the 2 requested signs, together with the current sign, that would occupy 55%?
That's correct.
Okay.
And I would offer that while it would occupy 55% of this particular wall, as you can see, there are adjoining walls that, this is quite a large complex, as you know.
I guess I don't have any other questions. Anything else? So why don't you make a motion to close the public portion?
Motion to close the public portion of the hearing?
I'm not sure where David is. David, you still there?
Yes,
Would you second the motion to close the public portion?
yes, I second that motion.
Okay, Lorraine,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes,
and Barney, yes. So I share Lorraine's, concern, actually, no, I guess Scott, if he had questions. I share Lorraine's concerns about the safety issue. Scott and I actually had an opportunity to talk with Chief Grace about it, and he didn't see any issues. But I think Scott and I agreed that, we were concerned about, pedestrians and not, looking at something animated and not seeing the car, and somebody driving a car in the parking lot not seeing the pedestrian. So, notwithstanding the fact that vehicles would be driving hopefully slowly, there is the potential for accidents and injuries. So there are public safety concerns. One of the concerns that I have about animation, and if she were here tonight, Kim would be jumping up and down about this, would be setting precedents. That before you know it, some other place would say, well, gee, we're unique, and we're a unique grocery store. So Trader Joe's wants to have an animated sign, and we're unique. Whatever Christmas tree shop, characterizes itself, so they would want to have an animated sign. So I would be concerned about it from that perspective. I think I'm okay with having, as you indicated, and we'd have to come up with appropriate conditions, a static sign. But I'd have to obviously listen to my colleagues and to Mr. Shippey and see what their thoughts are on it, so. Ray?
I would be more comfortable with a static sign. It would be illuminated, right? Be illuminated. Is the impact of bringing this from 55% down to 40%, is that a possibility?
We could look at it. I
I mean,
think
it's a possibility from our perspective, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for the total
Total area.
area. Yeah.
I
That
mean-
way, it's not setting a precedent for,
Mr. Chairman, if I may address, I think, a couple concerns that I've heard and offer a suggestion. As I mentioned, and if you were to circle the stadium in a vehicle, you'd see a number of animated signs in and around the stadium, including at the E2 and E4 entrances. Fairly prominent. In an area that I park when I have meetings there, I've parked essentially beneath a large animated sign. It doesn't present a risk, but this is my opinion, and I'm not going to substitute it for yours. Perhaps we would like the flexibility to allow Chris and his team to implement this, whether it be static as a banner or as an animated sign. Since we've continued the other hearing to provide you some more information for consideration, suggest that we might do the same here to allow you, we can provide other examples. The other thought here is that if it's the animation, if it's the dynamic nature, the movement that is of concern, you can have a digital sign just like you have a digital billboard that doesn't have movement. So you could condition it in that way if it presents an issue. So I defer to you, but we will be back to you next month on a related application, and we can provide additional information that may be helpful to you, both with respect to the existing animated signs that are affixed to the stadium, that are proximate to parking areas. Now, granted, these aren't retail parking areas, but they're busy parking areas. And I can appreciate the concern. We have no interest in again, creating any kind of opportunity for conflict out there or distraction. So if this board were to authorize these as animated signs, to condition them on review and potentially limiting that dynamic nature so that they would not be movable. It's one idea, if the board was inclined to act this evening. The other is to continue this as well, for us to provide some additional information that may provide you more insight one way or the other.
I'll go to you first before I curtain Dave, you're here.
all right. I understand you're saying that there are other animated signs in other areas, but when I view this area, the South Marketplace, I see it as really a lot of back and forth pedestrian traffic that I don't notice in the other parking areas. And I even feel like the parking is somehow more, it's closer, it's narrower almost. And so I don't feel comfortable with animation in that area because I do believe, this is certainly something that would be of interest to a lot of people to be looking at in such a crowded area concerns me. So I'd rather focus on the percentage of wall space as something to consider.
And a static sign.
And a static sign, yeah.
David?
Yeah, agree.
Dave, when you say you agree, with both the animation and with limiting, or I shouldn't say limiting, but reducing the size?
Yes, both of Lorraine's comments. Very big sign. I just see it that way. We keep adding to the size of things. Seems like with every upgrade.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the only other thing I can offer is that these are truly on-premise signs. They support a business in a, multi-billion-dollar investment in what is the economic engine in Route 1. These are not billboards, and billboards are far larger. And this board authorizes billboards and digital.
But again, billboards have to be a certain feet apart from other billboards. And again, we're talking about, as Lorraine indicated, a fairly complex?
Compact?
Complex,
Yeah,
right.
dense
So,
is better.
thank you.
No, I can appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. This is, in terms of precedent, and I always try to put myself in your shoes. There's this Sign District 1, in particular, large developments within Sign District 1 are the limiting factor here. So there is no precedent for anything else anywhere in town in terms of the impact of authorizing a special sign permit here. And in Sign District 1, in large developments, you can in fact have animated signs with your blessing.
Approval, yeah.
So I think it's incumbent upon us to show you if in fact an animated sign is authorized with your approval in this district, in this location, we need to demonstrate to you that it can be safe. And we'd like the opportunity to try to do that.
Except, we could state a period to try to demonstrate it's safe. And let's just say there are no accidents, nothing happens in 3 months, but somebody gets hit in the 4th month, somebody gets hit in the 5th month. I mean, that sort of goes back to our concern about, about safety issues. So I'm not sure that, a trial run in that respect, makes sense here. But I want to hear from Kurt. If he's still there.
I mean, I agree with Lorraine's position on this. I mean, with respect to the size of the sign, as far as the animation goes, I can see both sides of the argument. I would like to see a demonstration, but I'm basically, aligned with what Lorraine had mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. So I think the consensus is not animation. What would you have in mind as far as size?
I mean, ideally, if we could stay within the 40%.
Mr. Chairman, when you say no animation, the idea of having a digital sign option that would not have dynamic movement. I'd like to offer my client the flexibility to to have both a static, sort of more traditional sign as he's described, as well as a digital sign option, which would be illuminated like a billboard,
I
could be-
think that's what you're saying,
but without
but no,
movement.
without movement.
I wasn't thinking digital, I was thinking just a static sign, you know, two other static signs like the center one. You're thinking digital?
Yeah. That's what I thought you were saying,
So like to change every 10 seconds type of thing?
or whatever time frame we feel is appropriate.
Or seasonal as they proposed.
Yeah. So for example, come,
I
you know,
see what you're
winter time, middle of January,
Okay,
Hockey and
there's a picture of the
football.
Bruins, a static picture of the Bruins playing here, a static picture.
and
of
me
the-
crying here?
And you crying there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Static picture, you know, the Celtics on the other one. 10 seconds later, it changes to, you know, whatever. I think that's what you were suggesting, am I correct?
That's within the range, sure.
The other suggestion I would have, if there's, you know, and I take the chairman's point, if we can't prove with 100% certainty that a dynamic animated sign will be safe in a year, the board always has the opportunity to rescind the permit, and you could condition it that the building commissioner, in his discretion, can require controls, so that it could go from an animated sign if there was to be an issue, or if it needs to be adjusted, to a static display.
Also, the police chief has that authority.
But you've got enough to do as it is, I think, right?
Just a little.
So for example, then these could be two digital signs, which say, for example, we could say every month could be changed. The idea of it being like a message board, like every 10 seconds,
That's not acceptable, then?
no.
Okay.
Yep. But size-wise, are you thinking,
Well, certainly as an animated sign, it's too big. And I'm against the animation as it is. For the same reasons that you've indicated. Size-wise, you know, whatever, you know, you and Dave and Kurt feel is appropriate, you know, as far as reduction, I really don't have any specific limitation in mind.
okay,
How much of the wall is currently used now?
Those things?
How much of the wall is
23%,
currently?
Yeah, of the existing middle sign, I think, right,
23%,
23?
yep.
of the frontage, yeah. And it's pretty bare bones block wall frontage, so that's what we're trying to give some life to it.
Dave and Kurt?
Size-wise?
I don't have anything really one way or another on the size.
What about the notion of, you know, something digital? I had thought that Lorraine was saying digital, but what she's basically saying is the same as the current sign, just something static.
Yeah, that was,
Saying, you know, whatever it's going to say. But something digital that would effectively be the same as a picture in a newspaper. That would change at some specified time period.
Yeah, and distance probably.
Say
Maybe
that
not
again?
distance, I'm not sure about that, but
Dave, could you repeat that?
I said and maybe the distance, but I'm not so sure about that.
Okay. Kurt, your thoughts on that?
Not on the distance, no. No.
So by distance, they mean the square footage? Is that what the,
Well, how far the sign is from the, I guess, the roadway, main roads within the parking lot?
Dave, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what you're meaning by distance.
Well, as distance from the sign to, let's say, the roadway increases or decreases, what you visually see also changes. The amount of area that's going to take, the area doesn't change, but what you visually see changes based on the distance. Maybe I'm not saying it right. Trying to think of a way to express myself on this, but let's just say, for example, the Patriots want to put a sign up. How far that sign could be set back from the observer to be able to clearly see it or not see it?
Well, I think that,
Still not coming across, am I?
considering, again, our major concern would be the parking lot. I would think that any sign would be visible, whether it's digital or otherwise.
from Route 1?
You might see it from Route 1, but it would certainly be visible within the, within the
Within that
complex.
parking area, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there'd be any problem seeing that.
No, okay, well, I'm flexible. Just thinking about the whole
Okay.
situation and, maybe
digital.
there's something else to think about. A limitation on the number of such signs.
So digital would be acceptable to you and Dave? Sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no issue with the digital sign.
Okay.
Scott, do you see any, again, we had concerns with the animation. Do you,
I have huge concerns with the animation.
right, do you have any
The
concerns?
digital one, if it's within a time period, I don't have it. I'll defer to the board.
I think in that respect, it's not different than
Correct.
a billboard.
Correct. I think the animation, you have that foot traffic and somebody's looking up and seeing somebody skating, not paying attention to a little kid dotting out. That's my concern.
And the precedent of going over the 40%?
Well, again, we have the authorization to exceed dimensional requirements.
They'd all have to come before the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if it's just 41%, or 42%, or in this case, because we're of the distance from Washington Street, 33%, or something of that nature.
Mr. Chairman, can I offer a suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know it's testing your patience, but I'll do it anyway. The,
But be careful, guys, coming back here next month. So.
I know. What we're truly seeking is authorizations in two respects from the board, both with respect to size, as Ms. Bruce indicated, and then with respect to the nature of these signs to provide some flexibility for Mass General Brigham. And if the board could get comfortable, I think with respect to size, These signs were sized in a manner to provide for visibility throughout the center, not really from Route 1. And there's some synergy in the size of these signs to the central sign that exists. The percentage limitation on a wall is somewhat arbitrary, and it was developed without any context. I remember being part of that. Clearly, you can manipulate that by increasing the facade. We don't have an interest in doing that.
Well, there's no room to do that, unless you buy some other building.
Oh, no, I mean, you could grow in height,
True.
and retailers do that all the time. But we've no interest in doing that. I think these are, in my opinion, an appropriate size. If the board is concerned about a percentage and a precedent, I would argue that this is a unique circumstance. I suppose others could come before you, and you'd have this same, you don't have to rely on precedent. They'd have to demonstrate that their signage is appropriate as well. So these are considerably smaller than any billboard on Route 1. It is true there are 2 of them, but they're complementary. And they're sized appropriately considering the size of the facade. So that's what I want to offer just in terms of the size and the request for 55% of the wall area. This is a pretty bland wall. And any art or activity to activate it, I would argue should be encouraged. And then with respect to the nature of the sign, as Chris mentioned, he'd like the flexibility of having a banner, a nice banner that could be changed. It might not be changed, but it likely could be changed seasonally. Or to do a digital sign, similar to a billboard. And if the board is not comfortable with animation, with movable action on that digital board, we'd at least like the opportunity to return to you at some future date to allow for animation if we're able to convince you that it can be done safely.
Well, you can always come back,
Yeah.
For a modification.
Yeah.
So, or another.
But that's how I see the 2 pieces to this. I think in terms of size, I think you can look at it in terms of a percentage and be concerned about what the bylaw says. But the bylaw was really developed before a lot of these businesses were in place within a large development in Sign District 1. And you look at these on a case-by-case basis. I don't think there's going to be a proliferation, but clearly digital signage is the future. And this is, these are not cheap. And it reflects the level of investment that both Mass General and the Kraft Group are making down there. So I don't think there's a risk that somehow this becomes Las Vegas. I think it's more that what we're dealing with here is some sensible signage to make for a distinctive business.
I think we've put the animation to rest. We
Right.
killed the animals.
Right,
All right.
so I'm
Go ahead. I'm
I'm
fine
good,
with.
I'm fine with the digital and the size.
And the size? Okay. You sure?
Yep.
Okay, because I would have said reduce it to about 50% of the total area.
What does Dave think?
Dave, are you okay with the total area being 55%, or do you want to reduce it somewhat?
No, I'm all right with 55%.
Okay, Kurt?
I'm okay with the sign being digital and the size
Okay,
proposed.
all right, so we're approving what? Or what's our motion? To allow
for left and right sign, digital signage area of 1,027 square feet. No animation.
No animation. How about frequency of change?
Monthly, seasonally,
Can we do monthly?
monthly.
Oh, changing the entire message, okay. I'm fine with that. I think somewhere in our bylaw, they don't want a, high frequency of changing of the message. I can't remember what it is or where it is.
Well, on message boards, I think it's 10 seconds. But you want to do it monthly?
Right, because again, to me, the safety piece of this.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think anyone is going to invest the kind of money that would be involved for a digital sign if you can't change the content with some frequency. And the request for consideration of the board is, I think for purposes of your motion, just this could either be a true static sign, like a banner, or a digital, not to occupy in excess of 55% of the wall area, with no animation. But with respect to the change, you have countless billboards along Route 1 where a change is made every 10 seconds.
Right. That's not a parking lot.
It's a state highway. So, yeah, I can appreciate that, but I think the safety factor is shown there. But it is, you could not invest in a digital board and not have change with some frequency. I think the limitation that we're considering is there would never, we would not be able to have any action, any animation. The description of the rower that Chris described would not be possible because it involves activity, right, motion. So it would be a static image that could change, but it might be every 10 seconds or 30 seconds, or would not flash, and it would not move.
So let me make this suggestion. The total wall area to be occupied, the signs is 55%. 55% of the wall area to be occupied by 3 signs. The approved signage would total 1,027 square feet, the 2 new signs. No animation, no moving, no display, no illumination that moves or changes in intensity during the static display period. And the static display period, I would say 60 seconds. I would say even less, 45 seconds. Is that okay?
I was going to monthly because we started off seasonally, so.
I think we were apples and oranges. I think on the monthly, when Chris was describing the banners,
Right.
banners get worn, and obviously banner is truly static. You cannot change it without actually changing it.
Hang on. Okay, so, total wall area to be occupied by the 3 signs would be 55%. The new signs in total square footage was 1,027 square feet. No animation, no moving illumination, no changes in intensity during static display periods, no flashing lights or intermittent moving lights, no sound emission. Each static display to last at least 45 seconds and to effect an instant message change.
Sounds good.
Okay, Scott, any thoughts? Dave, anything else? Or how was that, or anything else?
Nothing else.
Okay, Kurt?
No, that sounds good to me.
All right. Do you want to make a motion to approve?
Motion to approve, so, well,
Mr. Chair, can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know the bylaws say that we have the discretion, myself and the police chief, if there's a public safety, if we can have that written in that decision as well. Because if there's like accident reports, we can review that.
As far as what, reducing the,
Reducing the time limit, I mean, if it's 45 seconds, I'm just, want to cover us. We might want to up that up to 60 seconds or something.
I think we're very comfortable with that. That we want to do what you ultimately find is right. If we have to make adjustments.
I think, Mr. Chairman, the suggestion might be that the board retain the authority to require the applicant, by delegating to the building commissioner, the ability to make adjustments.
yeah, I was just trying to find my, okay.
I know there's language in the bylaw stating that as well. So if we can just take that verbiage and put it in the.
I thought it would be. I gave it a bit of a cough in my head.
I'm reading, and the following factors shall be applied. One of them says, any public safety issues or concerns that may be created or impacted by the proposed sign. I don't know if you can use that language at all.
Yeah, that would be one of the reasons we can, All right, how about this, Scott? If the building commissioner or police chief determines that the display causes glare or impairs vision of motorists in the Patriot Place parking area proximate to the building, or otherwise may cause any safety issue, the applicant shall, at the direction thereof, within 24 hours of written notice, reduce lighting intensity or display duration.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yep, I'm comfortable with that.
So, we're approving the size.
Yes.
So basically, our motion is to approve the addition of signage on the walls of the building that are adjacent to the front entrance.
1,027
Well,
square
then,
feet.
subject to the following conditions.
Okay.
And the conditions would be that the total wall area occupied by the three signs is not more than 55% of the total wall. The wall area occupied by the three signs is not more than 55% of the total. The two new signs shall not occupy more than 1,027 square feet of space. They are to be digital with no animation, change in illumination, change in intensity during static display period, no flashing lights, no flashing or intermittent moving lights. Each static display is to last not more than 45 seconds with an instant message change. No sound emission. And then again, as I said before, if the building commissioner or police chief determines that the display causes glare or impairs vision of motorists in the Patriot Place parking area proximate to the building, or otherwise may cause any safety issue, the applicant shall, at direction thereof, within 24 hours of written notice, reduce lighting intensity or display duration.
So moved.
Okay. Dave, you want to second it?
I'm fine with it.
So you second it?
Second,
Okay. Dave? On the
second.
vote?
Good,
Lorraine?
Yes.
And Barney, yes.
yes.
And again, there's always the opportunity to modify. So if you feel at some point in the future, you can convince us otherwise, then that
Yeah,
avenue is open.
we appreciate the board's time, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. And we'll see you in June.
Thank you.
Chief, do you want?
We go, what, 2 minutes, right, Diana?
Yep.
So minutes from April 20 and May 9. Any questions?
Barney sent me corrections for April 20th, May 9th. I thought short and sweet is
May
good.
9th, were short and sweet. So motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
I'll second
Second,
it. Lorraine?
Yes.
Dave?
yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
And Barney, yes. We had some additional invoices on the Walnut Street project.
Right, so they had given us $13,440. We did one bill for $5,840. They sent two additional bills, thank you, for $4,050 and $1,290 for a total of $11,180. We'll leave $2,260 still left in the fund.
So they're underneath the budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically, we have the bill for March for $4,050 and the bill for April for $1,290.
Okay.
And I asked Frank Spillane, he was fine, he didn't need any other detail.
Okay, good. So a motion to approve them?
So moved.
Kurt, you've got to second the motion because you and I and Lorraine are the voting people.
Second the motion?
Okay, Lorraine?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
And Barney, yes.
Now, do we, because Frank asked about getting this returned back to him, do we have to save it for any period of time for as-built or anything? I don't think we put any conditions to that effect,
As bolts are part of they'll supply that.
so we don't need
Part
anything.
of, part of the final document.
Do we want
so.
it for the trees, if they have to replant the trees, any of that kind of
I
stuff?
think they're doing a surety bond on
Yeah,
that, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I can,
But a surety bond only if they abandon the project.
Right, but there was also, is there another,
I thought there was.
something for $15,000?
Yeah.
yeah. So,
You know, it's whenever, you know, as far as ad-built, whenever you,
No, they usually supply that with the final documentation, so.
Okay.
It's part of the requirement of the building permit
okay,
or getting their inspections.
all right. Anything else anybody has?
oh, whenever.
Not tonight.
Good.
Motion to adjourn.
Somebody want to second it?
Nobody wants to second it?
Dave did.
Okay, Lorraine,
Yes.
Kurt,
Yes.
and Barney, yes. So the next meeting is June 29th